Hey, Book Dragons, I'm so glad you've joined me today. There's a lot of talk in the bookish community about authors and the amount of output that they make on a yearly basis. There's some really prolific authors out there like Brandon Sanderson and Stephen King and even Terry Brooks. He's been writing for a lot of years, but he still tends to put out like a book a year, sometimes two. Brandon Sanderson still cranks out probably at least two books a year, same with Stephen King. So these are really, really prolific authors. And then there's authors that don't really put out a lot of books, like George R.R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss. And I often see a lot of vitriol and negativity from their fan bases because they haven't released a book in over a decade, right? It's been a while since we've gotten a book from them, and they often compare those authors to the authors that release a book or two a year and say, why can't you be like them? There's a lot of negative comparison on that, really. This is one of those situations where it's good to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And for me personally, I am in those shoes because I am an author. Shameless plug, I've got a book coming out soon. That book took me 8 years to get released. It went through several phases. I went through stages of burnout, writer's block, editor's block, creator's block in general. I went through all of those phases while trying to get that book out, and it's finally coming around to the time of the release, but it took me a long time to get there. And so I find myself in the shoes of some of those authors like Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin that haven't released a book in many years. In a way, my situation is different from theirs. They're full-time writers. I'm not. I have a full-time job. I have other hobbies as well. I'm not solely devoted to the craft of writing, even though I enjoy writing. It's just not my full-time job. So their situation is a little bit different than mine. But it doesn't mean that they don't have things going on in their life that complicates the creative process. I really think they do. And so I tend to put myself in their shoes and think, okay, if I was Patrick Rothfuss, for instance, what am I going through that would be hindering me getting out my books sooner rather than later? I often try to think along those lines so that I'm getting the proper perspective. And I recently read one of the newest newsletters from V.E. Schwab, another one of my favorite authors, and I'm going to read you an excerpt from it because it really spoke to me, not only as an author, but putting things in perspective for other authors that we're waiting on books from. So it was a really big encouragement for me, but it also helped give me some perspective. And I highly recommend that you sign up for V.E. Schwab's newsletter if you're a fan of theirs, or even if you're not. They have some really great thoughts on the creative process, and if you're looking to get into writing, that kind of thing, I think it can be really beneficial to hear from other authors, and their newsletter is really, really good. So anyway, I'll leave a link down below in the description where you can sign up for that newsletter. But I do want to read to you an excerpt from it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is just certain thoughts that I've extracted that I wanted to share. And it reads like this. We think of progress as a bar, waiting to be shaded in, and sometimes it is. But it's also much, much messier. An author works on a book. The easiest way, then, to chart their progress is to mark the distance from the end, how far they've gone, and how far they still have to go. But it's a reductive measurement, one that works better from the outside than within. It fails to capture or even acknowledge that the creation of a book is rarely a straight road, and that progress is almost never as simple as putting one step in front of the other, covering the distance from beginning to end. Thinking and dreaming and revising and deleting are all parts of writing, and yet we rarely include them in our calculations. We punish ourselves for the lack of measurable progress, for the words we didn't write instead of the working we did. I'm constantly thought of as a prolific author, a label that has honestly caused more self-loathing than pride these past few years. I used to break my year down by the number of books I planned to write. I'd calculate the amount of time it should take based on estimated word count, always failing to account for the time it would take to plot or revise, get stuck, or make mistakes, to budget or buffer for creative flux, let alone life itself, as if it were math instead of art, as if I were a machine. I wish I were a machine. I wish I had that grim efficiency, that ability to create consistently, in perfect measured bites, inching steadily day by day toward my desired outcome without a hurdle or a misstep. But that's not how stories work. And I know there are a few authors who make it seem possible, but let's strike the extreme outliers from the study instead of holding them up as a model to follow. Progress isn't just miles. It's steps. It's a hike with wrong turns and dead ends, moments you stop to admire the beauty, and moments you need to sit down because your legs are sore. And that's okay. It's not a failing. It's a part of the trek. And I wish we talked about it more, and I know why we don't. Because most of us are hoping to get better at it, to keep pace, to push and push until our legs go out so we can say, look, I tried. I gave it everything. That's how burnout happens. So how do you measure progress? Because let's be honest, you're still going to measure it. Maybe you measure progress in the time you sit with your work instead of the words that you write. Maybe you build in time for dreaming and deleting and changing course so you can say, look, I budgeted for this. Maybe you do whatever you can to keep the creative door propped open every day. Maybe you write one sentence as soon as you sit down so you know that no matter what happens after that, you made something. Maybe you cut yourself some slack. Because this isn't math. It's art. And you're not a machine. And I tell you guys, that really hit me hard. Personally, because I'm often the hardest on myself about the amount of output that I create. That's just being human, right? We're often more critical of ourselves than other people are. But there are people out there that really criticize when you don't put out the amount of creations that people think you should. There's a lot of people saying, hey, you owe us a new book. And I personally think the reality is that no author owes anyone anything. Why did they start writing in the first place? I think because they had a story to tell and they wanted to share it with the world. I know that's why I started writing. I started writing because I had a story to tell. And yes, I wanted to share it, but I also wanted to get it out of myself, to put it down, to have that accomplishment for me. And if other people enjoy it, that's awesome. But do I owe people a book? I don't personally think so. Do these big name authors who have put out numerous books now owe their fan base more books? I kind of don't think so. Do I want another book in the Song of Ice and Fire series? Absolutely. I am waiting for it with bated breath. Same with The Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. I'm sure there are other authors out there that are struggling to write, and they have people that are waiting for their books, and yet there's nothing forthcoming. And some readers might get uptight and angry even and say, hey, where's the next book? We're waiting. Why are you doing this to us? And yet, has there been any thought given to what has happened in life for these authors to go dark, so to speak? What is going on in their lives that is causing the delay? Maybe it's struggling mentally. Maybe it's struggling with physical ailments. Maybe family members have died. Maybe other things in life have just come up that has made it hard to write. Maybe they've got so much going on that they can't find the time to write. And on the one hand, you may say, okay, well, yeah, they just need to drop a few things. Maybe they do, but that's not really for us to say, right? That's up to them to realize, hey, maybe I should cut down on some of my obligations so I can focus on my book. We can tell them they should all day long, but ultimately it's not up to us, right? And I think what it boils down to is just remembering to be kind to authors, to put yourselves in their shoes, to wonder what things would be like for us if we had to deal with all the responsibilities that they do on a daily basis. All the while getting older and the years are getting away from us. We only have so many hours in a day, so many days in a year, so many years in our lifespan. If we never get another book from that author, maybe that's what's supposed to happen. We can hope, we can wish for it, but in the end, I don't know that it's really any of our business. Now, there are isolated situations where an author has made certain promises, like Patrick Rothfuss. He had promised people who donated to his charity that one of the things he would release is the first chapter in the next Kingkiller Chronicle book. And it didn't happen, and I get that. Do I think he owes that? Yeah, I kind of think he does. But I think there's reasons why he hasn't yet. We're not really privy to those reasons. And maybe one day he'll come out and say, oh, here's why I haven't done it. And he's alluded to things like his perfectionism getting the best of him and family things going on and all of these things demanding his attention, and all of a sudden no writing gets done. As fans, we can choose to have one of two responses. We can either get really angry about it and lash out against the author, which has happened. I've seen it in public forums, and I've seen what it does to the authors that are in these public forums talking about their work. It just hinders the process more than it helps. The other response we can have is, hey, we'll just wait and get your book whenever it releases, and if it never does, we've got other books to read. And maybe there's a middle ground in between there too, like encouraging the author, hey, we're really excited for your next book and hoping we'll get some news about it soon, but not being such high pressure about it, saying, hey, we know you've got a lot going on, but when you get a chance, can you let us know? There's definitely a middle ground there as well that I think is acceptable. And for me personally, I'm kind of on the side of, if I never get the book, I've got other stuff to read, and I'm really happy with what you've given us so far. I absolutely love the Kingkiller Chronicles. I absolutely love A Song of Ice and Fire, and I will reread it at some point because I love the series so much, even if we never get another book. I'm not saying be like me. I'm saying that that's one option, and you can find something that works for you. But I do hope that it's not the extremely negative side of things where it's just causing more harm than good. Not every author can be like Brandon Sanderson, who communicates regularly with his fans on a weekly basis even. Not every author can be like that. Not every author can output 3 or 4 books a year like Stephen King. That's just not realistic because everybody is different. So, to end this off, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. Be kind to authors. Before you lash out at them, think about what they may be going through in their lives and what you might be going through if you were in their shoes. Because a little empathy can go a long way. And with that being said, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what you think. And until next time, read more books. I'll talk with you soon. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to all my patrons. I really appreciate all you do to support my channel.